Welcome into ProBox TV's Deep Waters, where we take a deep dive into all things boxing. That's right, we're talking about right now the pay-per-view king, one of the pound-for-pound kings, of course. Canelo Alvarez has narrowed it down to a two-horse race for his next fight. Chris Eubank Jr., one of the possibilities. Also, Edgar Berlanga, who's also the WBA mandatory. Let's dive in to Eubank Jr. first. Of course, 34 years old, 33-3, 24 knockouts. Jimmy Smith in studio, joining me via Zoom, Chris Algieri, Paulie Malignaggi, and of course the one and only Teddy Atlas, grandpa of the year. Beautiful grandchildren, by the way. We saw them before the show. But one of the things we're talking about is Eubank Jr., a teammate of Terence Crawford. Bohachuk, of course, coaches both of them, could be setting up a showdown later on with Terence Crawford. Chris, I'll start with you. Are we reading too much into the tea leaves here about Eubank Jr. as an opponent?
I don't know. I mean, it seems like, it looked like Berlanga was the guy, right?
Yeah.
You know, he was supposed to be the guy in his last fight in May, and then at the last minute they switched it around and made it Jaime Munguia. Yep. This one looked like it was going to be pushing Berlanga to the September date. And then in comes Chris Eubank. And it seems like it's more about reactions from the fans. I don't know if people were loving the fact that it was Berlanga, even though we saw a lot of opportunity for the Berlanga fight because you got the Mexican versus Puerto Rican matchup. You've got Berlanga, who's undefeated. You know, he's a big puncher, especially early on. He's young. But yeah, there's a lot of reasons that Berlanga shouldn't be the guy as well, because there's other guys in the weight class that we would expect a guy like Canelo, who is the king of the division, to be taking on, namely the #1 contenders. And you got Chris Eubank coming into the fray now, who I don't believe has been fighting at super middleweight his last couple of fights. I believe he's been down at 160. He was campaigning to fight Conor Benn even lower than that. But now he's in the race to fight Canelo, which he's been throwing his name into the mix for quite some time. And now it's very close that he very much could be the guy. Do I love this fight? No. I don't hate it. You know, I think Chris Eubank is a talented guy. He's athletic. He's got some pop. He's been in some big fights. You know, he has fought at 68 before in the past, even though he's been campaigning at middleweight recently. He's 34 years old. He hasn't been that active. And again, he's not one of the top-ranked guys in the division to fight Canelo. But, you know, there are other reasons to fight him. Obviously, another English opponent, although Canelo's got a slew of them under his belt anyway. Yeah, I'm not quite sure what to take of this one, but I somehow have a feeling it is going to end up being Chris Eubank.
Paul, you've been critical, of course, of Canelo's choice in opponents. You talk about he takes mandatories when it's convenient. What's your thought on this possibility of Eubank Jr. sneaking in there?
You know, when you think about it, what we talked about, how Berlanga brings a big Puerto Rican fan base, especially a New York fan base. He's very popular up in the New York area. You know, you started to think, you know, that's a possibility of Mexican Independence Weekend and all this other stuff in September. You start to think that possibly that could be the direction he's going to go. One thing, what direction he's not going to go is David Benavidez, right? We already know that. And he's not going to go David Morrell. So we're going to look at the options that he's going to possibly go. And then Berlanga was one of those options, especially that Berlanga does have a little bit of popularity regionally in the Northeast coast. But then I looked at the schedule for Mexican Independence Weekend, and the UFC is going head-to-head on Mexican Independence Weekend. The UFC is going to do a card on Mexican Independence Weekend. So now we've seen this happen before, where Dana White doesn't really care if Canelo's fighting. He'll put on his fight. I believe he did Masvidal versus Nate Diaz the last time when Canelo was fighting Kovalev, and the crowd at the MGM Grand had to wait for the Nate Diaz Masvidal fight to end before Canelo gets in the ring. So Dana White sits for nobody. Canelo has to sit for him. And that was a sort of a big statement. I felt like it was you know, was sort of a kick in the teeth to boxing, really, if I'm honest. But having said that, why am I bringing that up? I'm bringing that up because if you look at the UFC schedule, they're doing that again in September. You could see Canelo now maybe taking his act on the road to England, where he's obviously be welcomed with open arms. The English love their boxing and they love their superstar fighters. You ask guys like Usyk and Lomachenko, when they fought in England, they were received very respectfully, even though they were fighting the local guy. They loved the fanfare they got. And England would absolutely love to have a Canelo Alvarez. Those boxing fans are, for me, those boxing fans are the best in the world. They would, even if he's fighting their local guy, obviously they would root for Eubank, but they would still be just privileged and in awe of having one of boxing stars choose their venue and choose their place to fight at. So I'm thinking with the combination of the UFC going on Mexican Independence Weekend, it may push Canelo at Vegas. And in that situation, it may push the Berlanga fight away, you know, because if you're fighting in the United States, Berlanga's a more viable opponent. He's more popular. Eubank really doesn't have a lot of popularity in the U.S., let's be honest. But if we go with that option, and yes, Canelo has fought English fighters before, but he's fought them over on this side, on this hemisphere. You go to Europe, you go away from the Mexican Independence Weekend, maybe a couple weeks later or whatever. Now you're not really stuck on Mexican Independence Weekend because you're fighting in Europe. And you fight Eubank in England. I could see that possibility now opening up, and I could see where he's going with this.
Well, you also have the possible time change. You know, if it starts regular time in England, maybe it gets in before something big starts in the United States. Certainly a possibility. Teddy, let's go to you about the X's and O's. Tactically, what do you think Eubank Jr. might bring to a fight with Canelo? Do you think it's a wipeout?
Well, he'll bring more movement, more boxing, more outside game, theoretically, than Berlanga will. Berlanga's got legs; you can use him a little bit, but at the end of the day, Berlanga's he's a puncher. He's young. I think he's too young. I don't think he's ready. The same way as I think we all concurred that Munguia wasn't ready. You know, and very similar. I mean, except Munguia had more fights, but both young guys that still needed a little more time before they got in that deep end of the pool. At least the pool that Canelo happens to dominate right now. But yeah, I think he brings movement. I think, optically, it might not be as good a fight as far as that. But Paulie makes the only important point that if they don't go with Mexican Independence Day over here, London is the place. I mean, those fans are rabid. Those fans. I always say, when I die, I want to come back as an English promoter. You know, because I'll be a multi-millionaire. Because those fans, they come out. I mean, look what they're doing. Look what they're doing for Joshua and Dubois. Some people don't even know who Dubois is. And he's a good guy. He's a good, solid guy who's won 2 fights in a row in the heavyweight division. But they're selling out Wembley. I think they sold it out in like a day or something. And now they want to add 10,000 seats to make it accommodate 100,000 instead of 90,000. That's all you need to know, that Paulie's right. That, if you could bring it over to London, that's the move. That's the money move. As far as a threat to Canelo, right now, either one of those two guys, for me, the only threat is Father Time. If Canelo suddenly gets older, and changes and slips, I think he's slipping a little bit. But look, like Paulie's always said, they navigate him so well, except the one mistake they made with Bevo. Other than that, they navigate. And he's the golden goose. So he has the privilege of being able, to pick his music. In the old days, the old timers would say, hey, we're going out of town and we're bringing our own music. You know what that meant. You were bringing an opponent. They're not opponents. These guys are live guys, but they're as close to being opponents as you could get, because Canelo always has the edge, and he always goes for the edge and knows he can, as I said, because he's the money guy. So at the end of the day, you want to make the big money, you want to make the big crowd. You don't have Mexican Independence Day option over here. You go to London. If you want the, you want the great rivalry with Puerto Rican and Mexican fans, you go with Berlanga. And again, you go with him, the undefeated record, you can sell that. And also, you got the edge. He's probably not quite ready.
Well, could you be good or could you be lucky? A lot of people would choose lucky. One person who hasn't been lucky has been Vergil Ortiz, but are things turning around for him? We'll discuss his next fight right after this.
Wednesday Night Fights. Don't miss the next Wednesday Night Fights. July 10th, Katsuma Akitsugi looks to stay unbeaten against ProBox veteran Eduardo Ramirez. Wednesday Night Fights.
That's right, Akitsugi versus Ramirez. If you have one of those punch counters that your coach drives you crazy with, it is going to break, I promise you, tomorrow night on ProBox TV. A lot of punches being thrown. It's going to be an outstanding night of volume and action. Don't miss our main event, Mexico versus Japan. Well, when it comes to main events, when it comes to star status, Vergil Ortiz, 21-0, 21 knockouts, supposed to fight Tim Tszyu. That was supposed to be on the August 3rd card. Tim Tszyu, of course, having to withdraw because his cut had not healed from his previous fight. So some bad luck so far for Ortiz, but we know his next fight. It is Serhii Bohachuk, who is 24-1, 23 knockouts. These guys, both heavy hitters. Chris, is this the right showcase fight to get Vergil Ortiz, who has had some bad luck, back on track?
Well, it can be the right showcase fight for him, or it could be the right showcase fight for Bohachuk. It depends on who wins the fight. I mean, this is a fantastic matchup with two, I mean, heavily artillery guys, and you know, we've been looking for Vergil Ortiz to have a big breakout fight for a long time. You know, he had some health concerns down at 147, couldn't make those fights happen. Has since moved up to 154. Had a huge showdown with Tim Tszyu that was supposed to be on the August 3rd card. Tim Tszyu has not recovered from that cut from the Fundora fight, so that fight fell through. And then this one's announced, which is this is an awesome fight. I mean, you got two guys who are really on a roll. They're both big punchers. They both have tons of KOs. You know, Vergil Ortiz, 100% KO rate, 21-0, 21 knockouts. Bohachuk, I think he's only gone the distance once in his 24 or 25 fights. So it's a fantastic fight with two guys with massive firepower. And really, I mean, it's a legitimate world title fight. It's the first real junior middleweight that Vergil Ortiz is going to fight. You know, he's been fighting guys that have been moving up from 147. So yeah, this is a huge fight. With a win here for Vergil Ortiz, I mean, this is a breakout type situation. I think the kid is the truth. I think we're going to be dealing with Vergil Ortiz for a long time. From what I've seen from him, he's phenomenal. What I've heard in the gym from him, he's phenomenal. But Bohachuk is no pushover, man. Big puncher. He looked great against Brian Mendoza. He's been on a tear recently. So I'm actually really looking forward to this fight. It's not the Tim Tszyu fight. I wanted Tim Tszyu and Vergil Ortiz more than anything, but I'll take this one as a consolation. No problem.
Teddy, let me ask you about exactly what Chris said. The physical side. Bohachuk is a big dude. The pictures really don't do it justice. He's very big for the weight class. Brings a lot of physical pressure along with the knockout power. How does Ortiz, do you think, deal with that? Do you think that's the story of the fight?
That's the good news. The bad news is right there. You can find them. And anyone that Vergil Ortiz can find, that's bad news. That's bad news for them. You know, it's not the best thing. He's not a ghost in the ring. You know, he's not a guy who disappears on you. He's a guy in front of you, which is great for us. You know, and that's why Chris is 100% right. That's why he's touting this fight the way he is, that he can't wait for it. We can't wait for it. It's a great fight on paper because the guy's in front of you. But again, anyone who's right in front of Vergil Ortiz, the way he punches with that left hook, especially to the body, he's got a good chance of getting rid of him. And on top of it, add to the fact that Bohachuk's one loss, he was stopped. Anyone who's been stopped, even blindly, I'm going with Ortiz. If somebody else can stop him, Ortiz, right now until I'm proven wrong, Ortiz can stop him because of the run he's on, because of the lane that he's in mentally and physically right now. He's in the best physical place he's been in a long time. You know, he's suffered with physical problems. You guys have talked about it. We have chronicled it pretty well. And now he's healthy. He's right mentally. He's confident. You know, he's in the right place. He doesn't believe anyone can beat him. And as long as they keep putting guys in front of him that he can hit, he's going to be right for the most part. And the last part I'd say on it, matchmaking always an important part of it. Well, Golden Boy is, I mean, this is their guy now. This is, you know, they lost a few guys, and we know about the problems with Ryan Garcia and all that. This is their next superstar that they're hoping for. And they're not going to make a mistake matchmaking with this guy. And they know how to matchmake pretty well. So at the end of the day, I think it's going to be fun to watch. I think the result is going to be what it's been a lot of times. When Ortiz has a guy who's going to exchange with him, which Bohachuk is going to do, he's going to find that left hook to the liver. And it's fun to watch.
Paulie, I got to ask you, you're not a fan, of course, of Crawford versus Canelo. Could the winner of this fight, with a dazzling performance, as Teddy said, a big knockout, could he be next for Crawford? Is that a possibility?
You know what? Well, I guess we'll see how Crawford looks on the 3rd of August against Makhmudov. You know, certainly he winds up, I think, putting himself in the mix if he's able to win and look good at 154, you know, without looking ahead to Crawford. Say the fight is competitive, or say he gets hurt, he feels the punches a little bit at 154. You probably don't go up to much higher weight classes to fight Canelo, right? I guess it'll all depend on how Crawford looks like. But sure, if Crawford plans to stay and campaign at 154, now you've got a weight class that, you know, is not devoid of talent and also brings the star power of a Crawford as well. I guess we'll have to see how the fights shape up. They only a week apart. I mean, I think Crawford fights on the 3rd. I think this fight is a week after, right? Guys, on the 10th of August. So you know, we won't have to wait long to figure out what happens there. And also, the good thing is when it's fresh in the news, you're on the tip of people's tongue, you know. So Crawford wins and looks good, or Crawford, you know, Magmadov, you know, gives Crawford a reason to stay at 154. Well, you know, the week after is Bohachuk and Vergil Ortiz, and Crawford's name might come into mix between those guys as well. But as far as this fight is concerned, I think Teddy made a great point. Bohachuk's been stopped, and that's the only kind of lightning rod that really sticks out here, because otherwise these guys are both aggressive guys who look to back you up. And one thing I notice about punchers in boxing, if you back them up, their punching ability gets really, really diminished. So this is going to be a fight where both guys are going to be looking to be the boss and back the other guy up. And both guys fight that way. Both guys typically, they like to back up their opponent and be the boss. It's just that Bohachuk guy got himself caught against Brandon Adams when he was trying to still be the boss. It's good and bad there, because Bohachuk likes being the boss and he's not afraid to go for it. We'll fight that, like another thing Teddy likes to say, that fighter's mentality, right? Like, he likes to take control of the fight and keep control of the fight. But at the other side, if he gets a little bit reckless, looks like, you know, his ability to take a punch can be questioned now because he's been stopped there. So if he gets a little bit reckless with Vergil, you know, you're not going to last too long. But either way, both guys, I think the fight goes in a way where both guys are going to be looking to back each other up. And the guy that's able to back the other guy up is going to have a serious advantage, because he's going to have the punching legs behind him going forward. And he's going to be able to take away a lot of the punching power of the guy going backwards. We will see who's able to impose their will on the other. But, dude, I look forward to watching it. This is going to be a really, really fun fight.
When you talk about will, you talk about skill, you talk about a marquee weight class. Now talk about Boots Ennis. Is he headed in the right direction? We'll discuss his promotion and his next fight right after this.
Wednesday Night Fights. Don't miss the next Wednesday Night Fights. July 10th, Katsuma Akitsugi looks to stay unbeaten against ProBox veteran Eduardo Ramirez. Wednesday Night Fights.
That's right, the Japanese fighter Akitsugi training out in the United States. He is in Southern California. He's talking about going around to different gyms and having to get work. He is so physically prepared for this main event. Wednesday night's going to be outstanding yet again on ProBox TV. Tune in, get the app. It's going to be a great main event. Now, talking about 147 pounds, Boots Ennis has looked absolutely not just good, he has looked absolutely dominant. And for the first time, maybe in the time I've been watching boxing, 147, not the marquee weight class it once was. When we talk about the great fights, a lot of times that we just talked about, 154, 140 is looking fantastic, 135 is great. Gentlemen, the question I have to ask, to start with you, Paulie, is Boots Ennis doing great things, but is it the one time where being possibly the greatest welterweight on the planet isn't what it used to be? What's your thought on him and where he is right now at 147?
Yeah, a lot of mismanagement, mispromotion on the career of Boots Ennis. It kind of is a shame, you know. His best years are kind of going past him, and we really haven't gotten to watch him against a marquee opponent where his best assets would have really been able to shine, and we would have seen just what kind of level he could be at against a top level guy. He's been tremendous against all the levels that he's been up against, but we just haven't been able to see him against a marquee guy. And I think, you know, changing promotional outfits and going over to the zone. Avanesyan has been a guy who's fought some of the zone fighters. He's actually, you know, been pretty much a spoiler his whole career. Pretty good fighter, but just fails at the very top. You know, he's typically got a really sturdy chin, really, really durable, and makes prospects look bad. He's even beaten a couple of guys he shouldn't have beaten, like Josh Kelly and Hector Lizarraga, who was a puncher in Europe, had the European title. Avanesyan was able to beat these kind of guys. Makes guys look bad. He's a handful as far as if you want to test your guy, whether he's real or not. The only thing is, when he stepped up to a guy like Crawford, he was knocked out with one punch, which shocked me personally, because typically, you know, he's a guy who takes a very good punch and is durable. And to go out with one shot against the next lightweight was sort of surprising. And I started thinking maybe this guy's chin is starting to go. You know, maybe, I don't know, maybe he's a little bit shop worn, having been used up a little bit. But typically, Avanesyan can be a rough guy to deal with. But at the very, very top, you're supposed to be able to handle him. And that's what you'd expect Jaron Ennis to do here. He's expected to handle a guy like this. This guy's a bit of a spoiler, but against this level, he tends to come up short. We will see if Jaron Ennis is still the goods here. But Jimmy, it's been a shame when it comes to Jaron Ennis's career. He's not really been able to get the accolades I feel like he would be deserving of, because the weight class is sort of barren at this point, and it needs to kind of be rejuiced. And when it was juiced up, nobody was fighting him.
Yeah, Chris, to your point, to Paulie's point, everything he's talking about is B-side stuff. Yeah, very, very durable guy, good chin, really tough, awkward, can be hard to really look great against, but not expected to beat Boots Ennis. Is this the right guy at the right time, Chris, for this homecoming kind of fight? It's in Philly.
Well, this fight is going to be used as a litmus test. You're going to compare Jaron Ennis versus Terence Crawford, which the comparisons have been thrown around quite a bit. Right. Thinking about how that fight would go down the line, thinking about, that fight was supposed to happen. And then Terence now moved up. He's getting bigger, better fights. They said that, from their side, they're not looking at a Jaron Ennis fight. Doesn't do anything for them. They're looking for bigger fights in higher weight classes. So Jaron Ennis fighting a former opponent, a former foe, a former defeated foe of Terence Crawford, it's going to 100% turn into, all right, this is what you did to him. Now look what I can do to him. And I think that's how the fan base is going to look at it as well. You mentioned the homecoming. Philly has a vast boxing history. It's a historical city. Haven't had any big fighters headlining there in a very long time. You got to think Bernard Hopkins was the last big time Philly fighter that was, had one of the longest, or I think the longest middleweight reign. But now, you got Jaron Ennis, who hasn't been around. He hasn't been fighting. He's been inactive. That's all the points that the champ Paulie Malignaggi made. Moving to Matchroom. Now he's getting the headline. They're bringing him home. I think it's a good thing. I think it's a really good thing because like you said, he's one of the best fighters in the world. Bringing him home to a fighting city like Philadelphia is great. And then also you got Avanesyan, who is durable. He's tough, but at this level, generally doesn't really hang. So for me, this is a litmus test to how Jaron Ennis is going to dispatch him in relation to how Terence Crawford did.
Coach, when you look at this one, when it comes to the cautionary tale, Teddy, do you think this is a cautionary tale of promotion? You've got to have a big fight by a certain time. As Paulie says, maybe his best years have passed him by without that big fight. What's your thought on it promotionally, Teddy?
Well, here's the good news and bad news for me. The good news, and I'm really very grateful, is to work with such brilliant people that really know this sport and know how to articulate it. The bad news is when I go last, they always steal my thunder because they are so damn brilliant. And you know what? I'm left here saying what Chris just said or what Paulie just said, but it does fall really down to what Chris said. This fight is about one thing. It's about getting a tremendous fighter. We don't know how good he could be, because he hasn't been tested at in those limits yet. We know what the car looks like. We're not 100% sure what's under the hood because he hasn't been tested, like I said. You never know a guy until they're tested. A fight's not a fight until there's something to overcome. He hasn't, for the most part, he hasn't really had something to really overcome where you can say, yeah, that's the guy. Yeah, with all his talent, he's got the whole package. He's got everything. And you're not going to find that out in this one. What this one is about, it's about bringing him out to the public more. And that's why I started the way I started, because it's a shame, to Paulie's point. It is. It's a shame that the public, we know about him, the boxing insiders know about him, the aficionados know about him, but for the most part, you go down the street, probably in Philadelphia, and you ask somebody who's Ennis, and they might say, I'm not sure, he was a politician a few years ago, wasn't he? Roy Ennis, I liked him, by the way, Roy Ennis. He was a politician no, that's not him. He's a welterweight champion. So this fight is about one thing. It's about highlighting their guy. It's about getting their guy exposure. It's about leapfrogging a little bit, making up some ground in that area, promotional area, to get their guy out front and center. And there's only one way to do it, with a guy that you can knock out and they can knock him out. He's been knocked out twice. The last time, of course, by the great Crawford. And by doing what Chris said, by beating the amount of rounds, I think it was 6 rounds that he got knocked, that Crawford knocked. They're going to go out there. I guarantee you, no matter what they say, Chris is right. They're going to go out there. Their plan is to knock him out before 6 rounds and be able to have that as a talking point, be able to put that on the highlight reel, be able to use that again, the leapfrog, some of the things they got to do to get their guy out there in the public, known in a way that he's not known, in a way that he deserves to be known, but he's not known because he hasn't fought those elite fights yet. So go in there and knock out Avanesyan quicker than the great Crawford did. And then you know what? Maybe they'll start talking about moving up in weight. He's got a big skeleton. He's a really big welterweight. Matter of fact, I think he is. He's been off a year. I don't think it's going to matter. I think he will knock him out quicker than Crawford. He's bigger. He's younger. I think that he knows what number to go after. He knows he wants to go after that number 6, get it in before 6. I think he's got a real good chance of being able to do that. And like I said, he's got that big frame. He's a huge, I don't know how he makes the weight. He can move up to junior middleweight and easily, if he does this, easily start saying or trying to put pressure, saying, hey, you guys, I'm the new kid and I'm the new guy in town. How about me? I think that's what it's about.
Well, it is about, as you said, size, technique, skill. It's also about a homecoming. Philly, as a boxing town, can it be reborn? We'll discuss it right after this. Welcome back to Deep Waters here on ProBox TV. Eddie Hearn has brought boxing to Phoenix in a big way. It's become a fight center of the Southwest. Philly, always at the center of the boxing universe. Joe Frazier, B-Hop, Meldrick Taylor, one of the all-time greats at 140, 147. So when you look at Philly as a fight capital, Boots Ennis, a hometown kid trying to bring it back. Paulie, let's start with you. How important is that to make Philly the center somewhat of the boxing universe yet again, as so many great fights are going overseas?
You know what? Philly being a capital of boxing is more so the fighters and the gyms. I noticed that they breed a lot of talented fighters. When you think about Philly boxing, you think about that really grunge type of, coming up in the gutter and then fighting your way through it, and those tough boxing gyms that they got over there, and they breed up this talent. And then you think of the Blue Horizon back in the day, the club fighting arena. There was a lot of guys on the come up were going through and sort of made their bones in that place. You think about that. You think about the character of a Philly fighter. I don't know. Maybe my co-workers, my co-commentators could correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't really think about Philly arenas as fights in Philly that are. I mean, maybe Rocky won, but that wasn't real, But I don't really think about Philly as being a place that houses big fights. I think of Philly as a place that has created big time fighters that have fought in big time places. But Philly wasn't one of those places that the fights happened at. I mean, not typically. And like I said, aside from the Blue Horizon, I can't really mention to you a Philadelphia arena that stands out to me in historically. Obviously, yeah, I'm sure they had some fights at Philadelphia Spectrum. Like I said, Rocky fought there, but I'm saying I don't know. I think Philly, when we talk about Philly boxing, we don't look at it as a haven for the fights to go there. We look at it as, wow, this city is, the city of brotherly love, but it has produced a ton of boxing talent.
Would that be important, Teddy? Even in my notes, it says fighting in Philly, home of the Flyers, right? It's not home of this great boxing fight, the way Paulie just mentioned. How important would it be to bring a big fight to Philly and make that a promotional center of boxing, Teddy?
Look, Philadelphia, Paulie makes a great point. Their gym sparring sessions, the wars in the gyms are more legendary than many of the fights that have taken place in any arena, much less any arena in Philly. They are known. They're known for breeding. You think of Philadelphia, you think along the point of what Paulie said. You're thinking of gritty, hard-nosed guys that have earned their way, have earned their dues, have paid their dues, made their bones, so to speak, when they come out of Philadelphia. I think more of that. It'd be great to, to me, you don't have to label it or you don't have to christen it. You don't have to find something to make it the fight capital. It will always have the thought of being the place where tough fighters come from, where if you come out of Philly, you've been tested. You've been fire. I always talk about being tested. You got to get tested in a fight. In Philly, you get tested in the gym. If you get out of the gyms in Philly, for the most part, back in the day, you've been tested. You know you can stand up. But for me, the real point I would make about everything Paulie said, everything that I'm connecting with that is Marvin Hagler. Maybe the greatest middleweight of all time, one of the greatest middleweights, great person. I really love Marvin Hagler. Rests well up there, champ. He was great, and maybe the greatest southpaw of all time. And he, on his way up, he didn't have the gold medal. He came from Brockton, Mass, the same way as Rocky Marciano, came from a tough place, and he didn't have the benefits of having a big-time promoter, like I said, having a gold medal, getting paid right away, getting protected. He had to do it the hardscrabble way. He had to earn it. And how did he earn it? He went to Philadelphia to fight the best middleweights, Willie the Worm Monroe, Boogaloo Watts. First of all, where else you going to get those kind of names other than Philly? Right there. You got to go with Philly. You got to put him in a special place. Boogaloo Watts, come on. Willie the Worm. He went there and he demanded it. The Petronelli brothers were managing him. He told them, and he was warned by promoters. Why are you coming here? You're going to fight a tough fight. You're not going to get any gifts. And you're really risking this guy because he wants to. Because Marvin Hagler said, if I'm going to be the best middleweight in the world, I have to go to Philadelphia. The best middleweight in the world tracks through Philadelphia. I have to go through there and beat their fighters to be the best. Guess what? He went there. He lost. He went back. He won. That was Marvin Hagler. That's why he was so great. And that's why Philadelphia is always going to be important in boxing.
How much does that rub off Chris Algieri on Boots Ennis coming home? Does he need that kind of as Paulie just said, that kind of myth-making performance? Does he need that?
And Teddy, I'm going to go to what you just said, in the last segment. Man, it's really hard to follow you guys. Jeez, you said it's hard to follow us. Come on, how am I supposed to follow that?
I want to give you a taste of your own medicine. Yeah, that's all.
You got me back, Teddy. You got me back. So I got one point you guys didn't make. What else is Philly known for? Their fans. Philadelphia Eagles fans are crazy. They are nasty, awesome fans. You want fans like that. You want fans that are gonna go nuts when you fight or when you
throw snowballs at Santa Claus.
Exactly. So listen, they might not have the arenas like you said, Paulie. Historically they might not have the events like you said, Teddy. They got the gym wars, they got the tough mentality, but man, they got the fans. So now if you could bring a guy like Jaron Ennis back home and make those fans get notice of him, like you said, Teddy. Who this guy Ennis? Do we know who this guy is? Well, they're gonna know who he is after this fight, and that's a major play. It's important to have fans, having a home base, whether you literally are fighting at home or not. You have a rabid fan base who are gonna follow you, and a guy like Jaron Ennis needs that right now.
They booed Santa Claus.
That's right, boo Santa Claus, rabid fans, but that's what we have here also on ProBox TV Deep Waters. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.